After my grandson was born, I got an eviction letter from my daughter-in-law. The rightful heir has been born. What she didn't know was that I had already hidden a $2 million fortune inherited from my husband. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Eileen, and I'm 72 years old. Yesterday was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life. My grandson was born. Today, I'm holding an eviction notice from my own daughter-in-law. The letter arrived this morning, delivered by Freya herself with a smile that could freeze hell over. She knocked on my bedroom door, the bedroom in the house I helped buy, and walked in like she owned the place, which apparently she believes she does now. "Good morning, Eileen," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I have something for you." I was still in my nightgown, having barely slept after spending the night thinking about my beautiful grandson, little Thomas, with his tiny fingers and that soft baby smell that takes you back decades. I'd held him for exactly 3 minutes yesterday before Freya decided I'd had enough. "What is it, dear?" I asked, though something in her tone made my stomach clench. She handed me the envelope with theatrical flair. "Open it." The paper felt expensive between my fingers. Freya always did have a taste for the dramatic. As I read the words, my hands began to shake. Notice to vacate. You have 30 days to remove yourself and your belongings from this residence. The legitimate heir has now been born and your services are no longer required. Services? She called my 43 years of motherhood services. "I don't understand," I whispered. Though I understood perfectly. This was Freya's moment of triumph. "It's quite simple," she said, settling into the chair by my window like she was explaining something to a child. "Brent and I have our son now. We need the space. You've been living here rent-free for 2 years. And frankly, it's time you learned to take care of yourself." 2 years. 2 years since my husband Tyson died and left me supposedly with nothing but this room in my son's house. 2 years of being treated like an unwelcome guest in what used to be my home. "Where's Brent?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "He's at work, naturally. Someone has to provide for this family." She examined her manicured nails. "He knows about this, of course. We discussed it thoroughly. My son knew. My own son knew his wife was throwing his mother out like yesterday's garbage. And he said nothing. Freya, please. Can't we talk about this? I help with the baby. I do the cooking, the cleaning." "That's exactly the problem," she interrupted, her mask slipping for just a moment. "You hover. You interfere. You make me feel like a guest in my own home." The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been made to feel like a guest in my own son's life for years, and now she was complaining about the same feeling. "I raised Brent in this house," I said quietly. His father is dead," Freya snapped. "And Brent is my husband now. This is our family, our home, our life. You're just in the way." Each word hit like a physical blow. I looked around the room that had become my entire world. The wedding photo of Tyson and me on the nightstand, the quilt my mother made draped over the chair, the small bookshelf filled with novels I'd collected over a lifetime. 30 days, Freya repeated, standing up and smoothing her designer dress. "I think that's generous considering." "Considering what?" She paused at the door, and for a moment I saw something cold and calculating in her eyes. "Considering you never really belonged here anyway." After she left, I sat on the edge of my bed for hours holding that letter. The house was quiet except for the occasional cry from the baby. My grandson, the child I'd been so excited to spoil and love and teach all the things I'd taught his father. I thought about calling Brent, demanding to speak with him. But what would I say? That his wife was cruel? He already knew that. That I didn't deserve this treatment? He'd chosen his side long ago. The truth is, I'd been preparing for this moment without realizing it. Not the eviction. I never saw that coming. But the moment when I'd have to decide whether to keep pretending I was powerless. You see, Freya made one crucial mistake. She assumed that because I lived quietly, dressed modestly, and never flaunted wealth, I didn't have any. She assumed that when Tyson died, he left me with nothing but the clothes on my back and a room in my son's house. She was wrong. Hidden in a safety deposit box across town, gathering interest for 2 years, sat $2 million. Tyson's life insurance policy, his retirement accounts, and the sale of assets Freya never knew existed. Money I'd kept secret, not out of greed, but out of caution. Money I'd planned to use to secure my grandson's future. But now, sitting in that bedroom with an eviction notice in my lap, I realized something. Before I could secure anyone else's future, I needed to reclaim my own dignity. Freya wanted me gone. Fine, but she had no idea what she'd just unleashed. The boxes arrived that afternoon. Freya had ordered them online with same-day delivery, just to make her point crystal clear. I found them stacked outside my bedroom door like a not-so-subtle reminder that my time was ticking. As I began folding my clothes, each item brought back memories I'd tried to bury. The blue dress I wore to Brent's college graduation, bought secondhand because every penny had gone toward his tuition. The cardigan with the small hole in the elbow that I'd never replaced because Brent needed new textbooks that semester. People talk about a mother's sacrifice like it's some noble, beautiful thing. They don't mention how it hollows you out slowly, piece by piece, until you forget who you were before you became someone's everything. After Tyson's first heart attack when Brent was 16, I took on extra shifts at the department store where I worked. Tyson couldn't work construction anymore, and we had a son who dreamed of becoming an engineer. College wasn't cheap, and scholarship money was scarce. I remember the morning I sold my grandmother's pearl necklace. Brent needed a laptop for his senior year, and we were behind on the mortgage. I told Tyson I'd lost it, unable to bear the guilt in his eyes. Some sacrifices are meant to be invisible. When Brent got into State University, I was so proud I cried for 3 days straight, but the tuition bills nearly broke us. I took a weekend job cleaning offices, leaving the house at 5 o'clock in the morning and coming home after midnight. Tyson was getting sicker, but he never complained about my absence. He understood what we were doing and why. "She's building his future," I heard him tell his brother once. "A mother does what she has to do." The irony is that I thought I was teaching Brent about hard work and dedication. Instead, I taught him that mothers exist to sacrifice everything without expecting anything in return. After Tyson died, I could have told Brent about the insurance money. $2 million would have changed both our lives dramatically. But I looked at my son, drowning in grief and struggling to support his new wife, and I made a choice. I would live simply, help where I could, and save the money for real emergencies. Living in Brent's house wasn't supposed to be permanent. It was supposed to be a transition, a few months while I figured out my next chapter. But Freya had other plans. She moved into that house like a conquering army. Within weeks, she'd rearranged everything, thrown out Tyson's belongings without asking, and made it clear that I was there on sufferance. The woman who'd been sweet as pie during their courtship vanished the moment she had a ring on her finger. "Eileen, could you handle the laundry today? I'm just so tired." "Eileen, would you mind cooking dinner? You know how Brent loves your pot roast." "Eileen, I've invited some friends over. Could you maybe stay in your room?" I became the live-in help, invisible until needed. And Brent, he was so eager to please his beautiful wife that he never seemed to notice how she spoke to his mother. The worst part wasn't the work or even the disrespect. It was watching my son transform into someone I barely recognized. The boy who used to defend me against playground bullies now stood silent while his wife dismissed me like hired help. "She's just particular about her space," he'd say when I mentioned Freya's behavior. "You know how women can be about their homes." Their home. Not our family home where he'd grown up, where Tyson and I had built our life together. Their home where I was an intruder. The pregnancy made everything worse. Suddenly, Freya was precious cargo, and I was the designated caretaker. Morning sickness duty, grocery runs, doctor's appointments. When Brent couldn't get off work, I did it all gladly, thinking this grandchild would bring us together. Instead, it gave her the perfect weapon. "The baby needs stability," she'd say whenever I suggested anything. "Too many people around will confuse him. We need to establish routines without interference. Brent and I need to learn to be parents without someone hovering." Always with Brent nodding along, too tired from working overtime to think critically about what she was really saying. The night before Thomas was born, I helped Freya pack her hospital bag. She was having contractions but insisted on controlling every detail. "I only want immediate family in the delivery room," she announced as another contraction hit. "Of course," I said, assuming I was included. She looked at me like I was simple. I mean, Brent and me and my mother, obviously her mother, who lived 3 states away and had visited exactly twice during the pregnancy. Her mother, who'd spent both visits criticizing everything from the nursery colors to Brent's job prospects. I spent 14 hours in that hospital waiting room while my grandson was born. 14 hours listening to updates from Brent, who seemed surprised that I was still there. "You don't have to wait, Mom," he said during one of his brief appearances. "It might be a while longer, but where else would I go?" This was my grandchild, my family, my heart walking around outside my body in the form of a 7-pound miracle. When I finally held Thomas, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Pure, uncomplicated joy. This tiny person was part of me, part of Tyson, part of the love story we'd written together. I should have known Freya wouldn't let it last. Now, packing my life into cardboard boxes, I understood the full scope of her plan. The pregnancy had been her power play, the baby her trump card. She'd waited until she had everything she needed: a house, a husband completely under her control, and an heir to secure her position. Then she'd eliminated the competition. Me. The apartment I found was everything Freya probably hoped it would be: small, outdated, in a neighborhood that had seen better days. The kind of place where a 72-year-old woman goes to disappear quietly. I signed the lease with cash from my checking account, the one with just enough money to look like a struggling widow living on Social Security. The landlord, Mr. Chun, was kind enough not to ask too many questions about why someone my age was suddenly homeless. "Fresh start?" he asked as I handed him the deposit. "Something like that," I replied. Moving day was a lonely affair. Brent showed up for exactly 30 minutes, helped carry 3 boxes to his truck, then claimed he had to get back to work. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "This is probably for the best, Mom," he said as he loaded the last box. "You need your independence, Freya. And I need our space." Independence. At 72, after a lifetime of marriage and motherhood, I was finally getting my independence. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. "What about Thomas?" I asked. "When can I see him?" Brent shifted uncomfortably. "We'll figure something out. Maybe holidays." Maybe holidays. My grandson would grow up knowing me as the grandmother who came around maybe on holidays. The first month in that apartment was the loneliest of my life. I'd gone from a house full of activity, even unpleasant activity, to complete silence. The walls were thin, and I could hear my neighbors arguing, watching television, living their lives while I sat in my tiny living room wondering how I'd become so invisible. I tried calling Brent twice a week, keeping the conversations light. "How's the baby? Is he sleeping better? Has he smiled yet?" But even these brief exchanges felt forced, like he was checking items off a list. It was during one of these calls that I heard something that changed everything. "Brent, honey, tell the delivery guy to bring the bags upstairs." Freya's voice carried clearly through the phone. "The Chanel bags go in the master closet." Chanel bags, plural. "Mom, I have to go," Brent said quickly. "What delivery?" I asked, but he'd already hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. Chanel bags weren't something you bought on a construction worker's salary. Even a foreman's salary like Brent had worked his way up to. Those bags cost more than most people's rent. The next week, curiosity got the better of me. I drove past their house, my old house, and saw a gleaming red BMW in the driveway. Not Brent's practical Honda, which was nowhere to be seen. A BMW with temporary plates. I parked across the street and waited. An hour later, Freya emerged in a designer outfit I recognized from a magazine ad. She loaded Thomas into a car seat that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget and drove off. I followed at a distance, feeling foolish, but unable to stop myself. She went to the most expensive shopping district in town, spending what looked like hours in boutiques I'd never dared enter, even when Tyson and I were doing well. When she came out of the jewelry store, she was wearing new diamond earrings that caught the sunlight like tiny stars. That evening, I called Brent again. "How are things at work, honey?" I asked casually.
"Tough," he said.
And he did sound tired. "We're working 10-hour days to make ends meet. The baby's expensive, you know." Make ends meet while his wife bought BMWs and Chanel bags. "Are you getting enough help at home?" I pressed gently. "Freya does what she can, but she's exhausted from the baby. She deserves nice things after what she's been through. Like pregnancy and childbirth were some unique trial no woman had ever endured before." Over the next few weeks, I made it my business to learn more. I started taking walks through their neighborhood, timing them for when I knew Brent would be at work. The BMW became a regular fixture, joined by shopping bags from stores I recognized from magazine advertisements. The final straw came on a Thursday afternoon. I was walking past when I heard raised voices through an open window. "I don't care what your mother thinks," Freya was shouting. "She had her chance to be important, and she blew it.
This is our life now."
She just wants to see Thomas," Brent's voice pleading. "She can see him when I say she can see him. She's not taking over my son the way she tried to take over you. Take over him. I'd raised him, loved him, sacrificed everything for his future. If that was taking over, then what was Freya doing now? She's lonely, Freya. Maybe if you could just what? Family money they haven't disclosed, illegal activity, or someone else. Someone else." The words hung in the air like a challenge. "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe your daughter-in-law has a benefactor. Someone who's not your son." The possibility hadn't occurred to me. But as soon as he said it, pieces started falling into place. Freya's sudden confidence after the baby was born. Her eagerness to get rid of me. Her absolute certainty that she could treat my son like a meal ticket without consequences. "How long would an investigation take?" I asked. "Depends on what we find. Could be a week, could be a month. My retainer is $1,500. I wrote the check from my secret account, the one Freya didn't know existed. I want to know everything. Where the money's coming from, what she's planning, everything." Marcus tucked the check into his desk drawer. "Mrs. Murphy, can I give you some advice?" I nodded. "Whatever we find, it's probably going to hurt. Information like this usually does. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about the last 2 months. The loneliness, the humiliation, the gradual realization that my son had chosen his wife's version of reality over his own mother's love. "Mr. Henderson, I've already been hurt. Now I want the truth." The waiting was torture. For 2 weeks, I heard nothing from Marcus. I went about my routine. Grocery shopping, library visits, long walks around my neighborhood, but my mind was always on the investigation. Then he called. "Mrs. Murphy, we need to meet, and you might want to sit down for this conversation." His office felt smaller this time, claustrophobic. Marcus had a thick folder on his desk, and his expression was grimmer than before. "I'm going to be direct," he said without preamble. "Your daughter-in-law is having an affair." The words hit me like a physical blow, even though part of me had suspected. "With who?"
"Richard Castellano."
"He owns 3 car dealerships in the area. Married, 2 kids, worth about $8 million. $8 million. No wonder Freya could afford Chanel bags." "How long?" I whispered. "Based on what I can document, at least 6 months, but probably longer." He slid a photograph across the desk. "This was taken last Tuesday at the Riverside Hotel." I stared at the image of Freya in the arms of a man I didn't recognize. She was laughing, her head thrown back in pure joy. I hadn't seen her look that happy once during her marriage to my son. "There's more," Marcus continued. "She's been telling people she's planning to leave your son as soon as she can secure a substantial settlement. She's using the baby as leverage. My grandson, my beautiful, innocent grandson, was being used as a pawn in Freya's game." "What kind of settlement?" "According to our sources, she's been documenting everything your son owns, trying to figure out his net worth. She thinks he has family money hidden somewhere." I almost laughed at the irony. Freya was looking for hidden family money, never suspecting that the woman she'd thrown out like garbage was sitting on $2 million. She's also been telling people that your son is emotionally abusive, that she's afraid to leave because he might try to take the baby. The accusation was so outrageous, so completely opposite to Brent's gentle nature, that I felt sick. That's impossible. Brent wouldn't hurt a fly. I know, but she's building a narrative. If she files for divorce, claiming abuse, she gets sympathy, a bigger settlement, and probably full custody. Full custody. She would take Thomas away from Brent completely, just like she'd taken me away. There's something else, Marcus said quietly. She's been in contact with a lawyer. Divorce papers are already drawn up. She's just waiting for the right moment. I sat in that chair feeling like the walls were closing in. My son was about to lose everything, his wife, his child, probably his house and his savings, and he had no idea it was coming. But I did. What would you do? I asked Marcus. If this were your son? He leaned back in his chair. Considering, I'd warn him, but I'd also prepare for the possibility that he won't believe you. Men in love do stupid things, Mrs. Murphy, even when the evidence is right in front of them. I thought about Brent, working 10-hour days to support a wife who was planning to destroy him. Brent, who'd chosen Freya over me so completely that he'd thrown his own mother out of his life. What if I started, then stopped? The idea forming in my mind was risky, potentially cruel, but it might be the only way to save my son. What if what? What if we let her show her true colors herself? What if we gave her enough rope to hang herself? Marcus raised an eyebrow. What do you have in mind? I smiled for the first time in months, feeling a familiar strength rising in my chest. I have an idea, but first I need to make a withdrawal from my bank account. The plan was simple in its cruelty, which made it perfect for someone like Freya. She thrived on other people's desperation, fed off their weakness like a parasite. So, I decided to give her exactly what she expected to see. First, I needed to set the stage. I withdrew $5,000 from my secret account and opened a checking account at a different bank, one where Freya might accidentally discover my financial struggles. I made sure the balance was just enough to look like I was barely scraping by. Then I called Brent. Honey, I hate to bother you, I said, letting my voice shake just a little. But I'm having some trouble with my rent. I was wondering if you could help just this once. The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Mom, you know things are tight with the baby and everything. I understand, sweetheart. I just thought maybe you could ask Freya if she knows anyone who might need some cleaning done. I'm willing to work. Another pause. I'll ask her. I knew he would. And I knew exactly what Freya's response would be. The call came 3 days later, not from Brent, but from Freya herself. Eileen, Brent told me about your situation, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. I might have something that could help you. Oh, thank you, dear. I'm so grateful. Well, I have some friends who need household help, but I have to be honest. They're very particular about who they hire. I'd need to vouch for you personally. Of course, I'd be happy to provide references. Actually, I was thinking we could meet for coffee first tomorrow afternoon at Café Luna downtown. I want to make sure you understand what would be expected of you. Café Luna was expensive, trendy, the kind of place Freya loved to be seen. Perfect. I'll be there, I said. And Freya, thank you for giving me this chance. Don't thank me yet, she replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. I spent the next day preparing. I dressed in my oldest clothes, the ones I'd worn to clean houses 40 years ago. I styled my hair plainly, wore no makeup, and practiced looking defeated in the mirror. When I arrived at Café Luna, Freya was already there, holding court at a corner table with 2 other women I didn't recognize. She'd clearly been telling them about me because they all looked up with identical expressions of pity mixed with superiority. Eileen, Freya called out loud enough for half the cafe to hear. Come sit with us. I shuffled over, clutching my worn purse like a lifeline. The other women introduced themselves, Linda and Margaret, both dripping with jewelry and judgment. So, you're Brent's mother, Linda said, looking me up and down. Freya's told us about your situation. Yes, well, I said, letting my voice waver. Times have been difficult since my husband passed. Of course they have, Margaret added with false kindness. It must be so hard at your age. Starting over, Freya ordered for all of us, without asking what I wanted. A $30 salad that I knew she expected me to pay for, testing whether I really was as broke as I claimed. Now about this job opportunity, Freya said, leaning forward with practiced concern. The Ashfords are looking for someone to clean their house twice a week. It's a big job. 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, and they entertain frequently. That sounds wonderful, I said eagerly. What does it pay? $15 an hour, she said, watching my face for disappointment. Cash, of course, under the table. $15 an hour to clean a mansion. Less than minimum wage. And she was presenting it like a gift. I'll take it, I said immediately. When can I start? Well, there's one small problem, Freya continued, her voice taking on that syrupy tone she used when she was about to twist the knife. They require a security deposit. $200 to ensure you don't steal anything. $200, money she knew I couldn't afford to lose. I'm not sure I have that much, I said, letting genuine panic creep into my voice. Oh, that's unfortunate, Linda said, not sounding sorry at all. The Ashfords are very particular about their help. Maybe I could work for free the first few weeks to prove myself, I suggested desperately. Freya exchanged glances with her friends. I don't think that would work. They need someone who can commit financially. Please, I said, my voice breaking. I'm behind on my rent. I might lose my apartment. The satisfaction in Freya's eyes was unmistakable. This was the moment she'd been waiting for, to see me truly broken, begging for scraps. Well, she said slowly, I suppose I could lend you the money as a family loan. You would do that? I asked, tears gathering in my eyes. Of course. Family helps family. She pulled out her phone and made a show of calculating. $200 for the deposit plus interest. Let's say 25%. You owe me $250. 25% interest on a $200 loan. Legal loan sharks charged less. I don't know how to thank you, I whispered. Don't thank me yet, she said with a cold smile. I'll need you to sign a promissory note, and if you can't pay it back in 30 days, there will be additional fees. She pulled out a piece of paper, clearly prepared in advance, and slid it across the table along with a pen. The terms were even worse than she'd stated verbally. Compound interest, late fees, and a clause that would allow her to claim my few possessions if I defaulted. This seems a bit complicated, I said, scanning the document. Business is business, Eileen, she replied sharply. If you can't handle simple financial obligations, maybe you shouldn't be working for people like the Ashfords. Her friends nodded in agreement, clearly enjoying the show. Of course, I said, signing the paper with a trembling hand. I'm just grateful for the opportunity. Freya counted out $200 in cash, making sure the entire cafe could see her generous gesture. There you go. Don't disappoint me. I won't, I promised, clutching the money like salvation. As I left the cafe, I heard Freya's voice behind me, not quite quiet enough to be private. Some people never learn to take care of themselves. It's really quite sad. The laughter that followed me out the door was sharp and cutting, but I wasn't crying as I walked to my car. I was smiling because in that cafe, surrounded by witnesses, Freya had just revealed exactly who she was. The hidden recorder in my purse had captured every word, every cruel laugh, every moment of calculated cruelty. And now I had everything I needed to show my son the truth about his wife. The call came on a Sunday morning, exactly 3 weeks after the cafe incident. Brent's voice was hollow, defeated in a way I'd never heard before. Mom, I need to see you. Of course, honey. What's wrong? Not over the phone. Can you come over? Freya's at her mother's with the baby. 20 minutes later, I sat in the living room where I'd once belonged, watching my son pace like a caged animal. He looked terrible, thin, exhausted, aged beyond his 32 years. She's leaving me, he said without preamble. Freya's filing for divorce. I felt my heart break for him, even though I'd seen this coming. Oh, Brent, I'm so sorry. She says I'm emotionally abusive, that I've been controlling and manipulative. He laughed bitterly. She's taking Thomas. I might only get supervised visitation. That's ridiculous. You're the gentlest man I know. Try telling that to her lawyer. He slumped into his father's old chair. She's claiming I have hidden assets, that I've been lying about our finances. She wants half of everything plus alimony and child support. Hidden assets. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so tragic. Brent, there's something I need to tell you about Freya. He looked up and I saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. What do you mean? I'd prepared for this moment, rehearsed it in my mind countless times, but sitting there looking at my broken son, the words felt heavy and dangerous. She's been lying to you about a lot of things. I told him everything about the investigation, about Richard Castellano, about the months of planning and deception. I showed him the photographs, played him the recording from the cafe, and laid out the evidence of his wife's calculated cruelty. With each revelation, Brent's face grew paler. When I finished, he sat in stunned silence for several minutes. How long have you known? He finally asked. About the affair? A few weeks? About her plan to leave? Not long enough to stop it, I'm afraid. Why didn't you tell me sooner? The question I dreaded. Because you wouldn't have believed me. You needed to see it for yourself. He flinched, but didn't deny it. We both knew I was right. There's something else, I said gently. Something I should have told you a long time ago. I reached into my purse and pulled out a bank statement. Brent's eyes widened as he saw the balance. $2 million, he whispered. Dad's insurance and his retirement accounts and some investments you didn't know about. I've been keeping it safe. All this time you've been living in that apartment, letting Freya treat you like... He couldn't finish the sentence. Like hired help? Like a burden?
Yes. But why?
Why didn't you just tell us?
Tell me.
I took his hands in mine, feeling how rough they'd become from all the overtime work. Because I wanted to see who you'd become without money changing the equation. I wanted to know if the son I raised was still there underneath everything else. And what did you find? The pain in his voice nearly broke my resolve. I found a man who loves his family so much he'll sacrifice anything for them, even his relationship with his mother. Tears started falling down his cheeks. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry for everything. I know, sweetheart. I know. What do I do now? She's going to take Thomas. She's going to destroy me in court. I smiled, feeling a familiar strength rising in my chest. No, she's not, because we're going to beat her at her own game. Over the next hour, I laid out my plan. We would let Freya proceed with her divorce, let her think she was getting everything she wanted, but we would document everything: her affair, her lies, her manipulation. When the time came, we would present the truth in court, not as desperate accusations, but as carefully gathered evidence. And the money? Brent asked. Will be protected in a trust fund for Thomas. Freya can't touch it, but it will ensure his future is secure. What about you? What about your future? I looked around the house where I'd raised my son, where Tyson and I had built our life together. It felt different now, lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted from its walls. I'm going to buy a house, I said. A nice one with a guest room for my son and a nursery for my grandson. A place where family is actually welcome. 3 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my new home, watching Brent push Thomas in a stroller around the spacious backyard. The divorce had been finalized 2 weeks ago. When confronted with evidence of her affair and her planned manipulation, Freya had agreed to joint custody rather than risk losing everything in a public trial. She'd kept the BMW and her designer clothes, but she'd lost the house, the security, and the control she'd worked so hard to establish. Richard Castellano had disappeared from her life the moment his wife found out about the affair. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. When I opened it, I found a delivery man holding an enormous bouquet of flowers. Ellie Murphy, he asked. That's me. I looked at the card as he walked away. Thank you for never giving up on us. Love, Brent and Thomas. Through the kitchen window, I watched my son lift his baby son out of the stroller, pointing up at the trees and talking in that animated way parents do when they're sharing the world with their children. Thomas would grow up knowing his grandmother's love. He would learn that family means showing up, not just when it's convenient, but especially when it's hard. He would understand that real strength sometimes looks like patience, and that the most powerful victories are often the quietest ones. I thought about Freya, probably sitting in some expensive apartment, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. She'd made one crucial mistake. She'd assumed that because I loved quietly, I was weak. She'd learned too late that there's a difference between kindness and weakness, between sacrifice and surrender. At 72 years old, I'd reclaimed not just my dignity, but my family. And for the first time in years, the future looked exactly as bright as I'd always hoped it would be. Now, I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.